Hi there. So last week we played our usual session and I had some technical difficulties and forgot to hit record. So what I've done is I've ran all of the points of our story through an AI system and had it produce a story to tell. So today's episode is going to be a short story. I'll do my best to make it interesting, but yeah, it's the best I got at the moment. So here we go. The mist hung low over Barovia as Bobrath, the bugbear rogue, joined the party, his hulking form wrapped in a cloak that made him blend into the shadows. The village was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of weeping that echoed through the streets. What's that? Gradia asked, her red eyes narrowing as she scanned the fog. Someone's crying, Hilly grunted, gripping her axes. Could be a trap. Bobrath silently slipped ahead of the group, his footsteps inaudible as he climbed onto the rooftop shadows, moving like a ghost. The sound of crying drew them towards the town center, where an old, dilapidated church loomed over the empty square. The windows were dark, save for a faint flicker of light that barely made it through the thick grime covering the glass. You hear it too, right? Alandis whispered, glancing nervously towards the church. Yeah, Cradia replied, but something feels wrong. The group approached cautiously, with Bobrath already at the front. Peering through the shutters, inside, faint figures shuffled through the pews, their movements slow and unnatural. They're not alive, Bobrath whispered. Zombies. Cradia's lips curled into a wicked grin. Perfect. Without hesitation, Cradia raised her hands, channeling arcane energy. A violent surge of power exploding from her palm, and the doors flew open with a deafening crack, splintering wood and sending it flying across the room. As the dust settled, the zombies turned their empty eyes towards the intruders. Bobrath, moving like a shadow, slipped into the church through a window, disappearing between the pillars. His daggers were drawn, glinting in the dim light, ever so slightly. Hilly rushed forward, seething with rage, swinging her axe into the midsection of the zombie, spilling entrails onto the cold stone of the church floor. Flesh tore, bones cracked, and the stench of decay started to fill the room. Alandis, disguised as one of the undead, shuffled among the zombies unnoticed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Hilly, meanwhile, let out a thunderous roar, her eyes wild with fury as she charged into the fray. Axes swinging with brutal efficiency, limbs flew, and more entrails spilled as she cleaved through the horde, her strength fueled by her rage. Bobrath struck from the shadows, his blades finding their mark with deadly precision. He moved like a specter, in and out of sight, always one step ahead of the undead. Within moments, the last of the zombies fell, their bodies crumpled to the floor, their intestines spilling everywhere, fluids. The church fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the adventurers. That was efficient, Alandis remarked, his voice still shaky from the fight. As the party scouted the room, it was Cradia who discovered something unusual. Her keen eyes caught the faint outline of the trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of rubble. She dusted off the stone floor, revealing the entrance. I knew there was more here, she said triumphantly, as her fingers traced the edges of the door. Hilly, with her raw strength, heaved the door open, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the earth. Let's see what else this place is hiding, Cradia said, leading the charge down the stairs. As the party descended into the damp, cold basement, the air grew heavy with the stench of decay. At the bottom of the staircase, a vampire awaited, his pale face twisted into a mocking grin. Crimson eyes burning with hunger, the flicker of torchlight cast twisted shadows across his regal form. So, you've come to die, the vampire hissed, baring his fangs. Cradia, always eager to face danger head on, stepped forward, her hand already glowing with eldritch energy. But before she could unleash her power, the vampire moved with terrifying speed. His clawed hand shot out, piercing straight through Cradia's chest. She gasped, her eldritch magic fizzling out as she collapsed, her body hitting the cold stone floor with a lifeless thud. Cradia! The party now shouted at once, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. The half-elf warlock, who had led them into the depths, now lay still in a pool of her own blood. The vampire smirked, stepped over her fallen form with a twisted grin and a lick of his finger. But the party wasn't finished. Hilly let out a roar of fury, charging the vampire with her twin axes raised. She swung with all her might, but the vampire dodged, his movements fluid and fast. Bobrath, ever the shadow in chaos, moved silently, his blade seeking weak points in the vampire's defenses. The battle raged, but the vampire was strong. Too strong. Like nothing short of a miracle, though, Cradia cheated death and rose to her feet, shaky but still alive, and now wanting revenge. Cradia looked up at Alandis, her voice weak but determined. I'm not done yet. As Cradia regained her footing, Alandis turned his full attention to the vampire, who was smirking, taunting them as if their struggle meant nothing. But Alandis had something else in mind. Oh, please, he said, stepping forward with a grin. Is that the best you've got? I've seen dustier capes on old curtains, and your menacing presence is about as terrifying as a wet cat. Honestly, I expected more from someone who could live for centuries. The vampire blinked, clearly taken aback by Alandis' words. What are you? Look at you, Alandis continued, his voice dripping with mockery. Undead for what? 100? 1,000? How many years? And you still haven't learned basic fashion? That collar is an embarrassment to vampires everywhere. The vampire hissed in confusion and fury, his eyes darting around as if unsure how to handle the insults. Alandis' spell had begun to take effect, his words cutting deeper than any weapon. The vampire stumbled, clutching his head, overwhelmed by a wave of mental anguish. You call this a battle? I've seen puppies more threatening than you, Alandis shouted, his voice echoing through the crypt. If I were you, I'd crawl back into the grave and rethink my entire existence. The vampire, utterly distracted and reeling from the vicious mockery, staggered backwards before he could recover. Princess Buttercup, who had been waiting for the perfect moment, moved swiftly. With a graceful leap, she flipped the vampire's pancake, sending him crashing to the ground in a dazed heap. Flipped like a flapjack, Hilly muttered, impressed. The vampire, dazed and furious, tried to rise, but Cradia was back in action. Her eyes blazed with wrath as she channeled every ounce of her energy into a massive eldritch blast, firing it directly at the vampire. The force of the blast sent him reeling, blackened smoke curling from his scorched body. Alandis seized the moment, drawing his rapier with cold precision. The vampire staggered, weakened and disoriented, as Alandis stepped forward, his voice calm, yet full of fury. You should have stayed dead. With one swift motion, Alandis drove his rapier through the vampire's heart. The creature let out a final, desperate hiss before crumbling into a pile of ash. The party stood still, catching their breath as the dust settled. Alandis wiped the ash from his blade and turned to Cradia, who was leaning against a wall now, still recovering. Welcome back, he said with a small smile. Cradia grinned weakly, her usual fire returning. Thank you. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Hilly gave her a nod of respect, and even Bobrath, hidden in the shadows, seemed impressed. Princess Buttercup, as always, moved gracefully, offering a subtle nod. The vampire was vanquished, but Cradia's revival and Alandis' biting insults reminded them that, in the face of darkness, their strength lay in unity and wit. All right, so that concludes that episode. Actually, a couple hours from now, we're going to be recording the next episode, and that will be a full visual. So yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for those that subscribe and follow our channels. And till next time.